I learned that a motel room can feel like a favor right up until the lock turns from the outside. My car gave up just after midnight, not with a dramatic sound, just a sag in the engine and a shudder that turned the dash lights into dim orange dots. The shoulder was narrow, and the interstate hissed beside me. I walked to the nearest motel under a flickering sign that promised low rates. Inside, the lobby smelled like old coffee and cleaning spray, and the clerk looked up like I had interrupted something. He was alone behind thick glass, with a slot for cash and a bell that did not ring when I tapped it. I said my car was down and I needed a room for the night, and I started to reach for my wallet and my license out of habit. The clerk lifted a hand and said, "No need for that, just pay cash, last room." He slid a keycard across like he wanted my hands gone from the counter. I hesitated because no one ever says no to an ID request, but I was exhausted and my phone was almost out. I asked which room and he said, 17, end of the hall, second floor. He leaned closer and lowered his voice and said, "Park right by the stairwell. You will be fine." He did not look at me again after I took the card, like the conversation had already ended. The hallway upstairs had stained carpet that grabbed at my shoes, and the air felt thick with cheap air freshener trying to cover something older. The door to 17 was scuffed around the handle like it had taken a lot of hits over the years. I swiped the card and the light blinked green. Inside, the room was small and loud with the hum of an ancient heater. I turned the bolt lock and the chain and sat on the bed in my coat. I called roadside help and got a recorded message about high call volume, so I texted a friend that I was safe and put my phone on the nightstand. The curtains did not close all the way, and the neon from outside painted the wall in a pulsing red line. I tried to watch a late show to keep my mind steady, but my eyes kept drifting to the door. I told myself I was jumpy from the breakdown and the highway noise. Sometime after 2, I finally fell asleep with my shoes still on. I woke to a soft electronic click, then the faint sound of plastic sliding, like a card passing through a reader. My eyes opened before my head did, and I stared at the door. The chain was still latched, the bolt lock still turned. Then the handle moved anyway, and the door eased inward against the chain, slow and careful, like a hand pushing without hurry. The gap widened a finger, then 2, and I saw the clerk's face in the opening, lit by the hallway bulb. He held a heavy ring of keys and a second card in his other hand. His voice was low, almost casual. "You are awake. Good," he said. I sat up and asked what he was doing, and he replied, "I always save 17 for travelers who come in alone." He said it like a policy, not a confession. I told him to leave and I said I would call downstairs. Then I remembered there was no one else. He slid a thin metal tool through the crack and lifted the chain in one quick motion, and it dropped with a quiet clink. The door opened and he stepped inside, keeping the keys close. "Do not bother with the phone," he said, tipping his chin toward the ceiling corner. "The hallway cameras are off. The night manager checks logs in the morning." I grabbed my phone anyway and the screen lit, but the signal bar was empty. He did not rush, but he shifted until he was between me and the door. I said I would pay extra to be left alone, and he said, "Cash is not why I do this." He looked past me at the window, then back at the door, like he was counting minutes. He asked if anyone would notice I was gone, and I said, no. I slid off the bed toward the bathroom, acting like I needed my wallet, and he let me, watching my hands. The bathroom vent rattled and the window did not open. I heard him in the room, keys shifting as he paced. I shut the bathroom door and locked it. Then I ran the faucet to cover sound. I tried to dial emergency, but the call screen just spun. My throat tightened as I realized the motel was a pocket with no exit. He knocked once and said, "It will be easier if you cooperate." I stayed silent and searched for anything I could use. The towel bar, the trash can, a metal rack by the sink. I wedged the rack against the door handle. Then I climbed onto the toilet to reach the vent cover. The screws were loose from years of steam. I twisted them out and pulled the cover down. The duct was a tight metal tunnel, but it was space. I pushed my shoulders into it and scraped forward inch by inch, hearing the door slam and the clerk's voice turn harsh. He struck the vent opening and the metal rang, then his hand reached in and brushed my shoe. I kicked and kept crawling. The duct bent toward the hallway and light showed through a grate ahead. I shoved it out and dropped onto the carpet, then slid under a housekeeping cart. I stayed there until footsteps ran past me towards 17. I crept to the stairwell and went down 2 steps at a time, my knees trembling and my lungs burning. In the parking lot, I did not go to my car. I went to the highway shoulder and flagged down a passing truck with my arms. The driver slowed and I climbed in, breathing out words that did not sound like mine. We drove to a gas station with bright lights and a working signal. When I finally called for help, the dispatcher asked for the motel name, and I realized I had never looked at the sign. I had only followed the glow. I watched my life get copied in a motel room while I was gone for less than 5 minutes. At the counter I paid for 1 night, and the free Wi-Fi felt like a small reward after a long drive. The front desk clerk slid the key card through the slot and said breakfast started at 6. He never asked for my email, yet a sign on the wall promised fast internet for guests. I carried my bag to the room, set my laptop on the desk, and plugged it into a loose outlet that hummed softly. The network name was printed on a card by the phone, and the login page asked for my room number and last name. I typed the room number, left the name blank, and it still connected. I said, "That is generous," because I was tired and my guard was down. I started uploading road photos, letting the laptop work while I brushed my teeth and tried to settle into the thin motel quiet. A cart rolled by outside, then a quick knock. I called that I did not need service, and the maid voice answered, "Just checking, schedule is mixed up." The door opened a few inches, and the maid leaned in, eyes flat, taking in the laptop on the desk. I told the maid the room was occupied. The maid said, "All right," and the door shut with a soft click. I did not think about it, because cheap motels run on mistakes. The upload bar crawled, the laptop battery climbed, and my shoulders finally dropped. I wanted ice for the warm soda in my bag, so I left the laptop charging and took the bucket down the hall. The ice room was at the far end, and the hallway felt empty, like the building was holding its breath for the night shift. I filled the bucket and walked back, already picturing sleep. My door was closed, but the latch looked wrong, as if it had been pulled tight without catching. Inside, the air felt warmer, and my laptop screen was awake. I had left it sleeping. My stomach went cold as I stepped closer and saw my email inbox open, not a sign-in page, but my messages, right there. A small window sat on top of the inbox, a forwarding rule being created, with an address I did not recognize typed into it. The cursor blinked at the end like someone had just lifted their hand away. The status line at the bottom showed messages sending out in batches. I listened for movement outside, but the hall was silent. I clicked cancel, and the buttons did nothing, like the laptop was locked into a script. I slammed the lid shut and yanked the charger free. I whispered that someone had been in my room, then I hated how small my voice sounded. I opened the laptop again and the inbox popped back up, still sending. Down the hall, a door opened and a low male voice said, "Hurry." Another voice replied, "It is running." I froze, then closed the lid again and grabbed my phone. My signal was weak, but I managed to turn on my hotspot and reconnect. The forwarding window was gone, yet my sent folder was full of messages I had never written, confirmations, receipts, saved addresses, anything that could map where I lived and where I was headed. A notification appeared about a new device signed into my account. I changed my password, and the change failed once, then worked, then failed again. I turned on 2-factor authentication and entered the code that arrived by text. For a moment the inbox steadied, then the motel Wi-Fi dropped and returned, and new forwarding rules appeared as if they were being rebuilt in real time. I understood then that the network was not careless, it was designed. They were waiting for travelers to connect, and they were using the housekeeping passcode to enter rooms while people stepped away. I started packing with clumsy speed, keeping one eye on the door. The cart rolled back, closer now, and the knock returned. The maid voice said, "You forgot your ice," like it was a friendly reminder. I did not answer. I looked through the curtain and saw a car by the dumpster with its engine running and its headlights off. A figure leaned against it, staring at the walkway, tapping a phone screen. The keycard slid into my lock. The handle turned. I shoved the dresser against the door and it jammed with a scrape. I called the front desk and said my room was being entered. and the clerk replied, "We will note it." I asked for security, and the clerk said, "The night manager is not available." The keycard tried again, then stopped, as if they were listening to my call through the wall. I waited until the cartwheels faded away, then I pulled the dresser back and slipped out, keeping my head down. I went straight to my car and drove to the brightest place I could find, a truck stop full of cameras and people. Under harsh restroom lights, I locked down every account I owned and filed reports, shaking the whole time. They did not need to take my laptop because they had already taken my life on paper. The smoke hit my lungs before I understood that the door was never going to open. After 10 hours on the road, I pulled into a rundown motel just off the highway. The kind with flickering neon and a parking lot patched more times than it had been paved. I paid cash at a narrow window, and the owner slid a metal key across without asking for anything else. The hallway smelled sharp and chemical, like someone had mopped with something strong and never aired it out. I told myself I only needed a few hours of sleep. My room was on the second floor, halfway down a corridor lined with stained carpet and buzzing lights. The door stuck before giving way, and inside the air felt stale and heavy. I cracked the window, but it barely moved. From the next room I heard raised voices, a man arguing with the owner about unpaid rent, about being locked out. The words blurred together as I set my bag down and lay back fully clothed. Exhaustion pulled me under fast. I do not know how long I slept, but I woke coughing, throat raw, chest tight. The room looked hazy, like a grey curtain had been drawn across it. I sat up and the haze thickened, pressing against my eyes. The alarm above the door was silent. No flashing light, no shrill warning, just the low crackle of something burning beyond the wall. I swung my legs off the bed and went to the door, twisting the knob hard. It did not move. I unlocked it again, shoved my shoulder into it, felt the frame flex but not open. The hallway beyond was glowing faint orange through the gap at the bottom. I shouted for help and my voice came back thin, swallowed by the corridor. The smoke crawled lower, hotter now, filling my mouth with a bitter taste. I grabbed the towel from the bathroom and pressed it against my face, then ran the sink, but the water sputtered and went dry. The vent in the ceiling rattled with heat. I tried the window again, forcing it upward with both hands until it rose an inch and stuck. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under the neon sign. I saw movement near the far edge, someone standing still beside a car. I recognized the silhouette from earlier, the drifter from the next room. He had argued about money, about being owed time. Now he stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the second floor, watching the smoke pour from the eaves. The realization hit hard. He had not left in anger. He had waited. The hallway exit must have been jammed, the alarm wires cut. He was waiting for the building to be claimed and rebuilt. The heat intensified, pressing against my skin like an oven door left open. I dragged the desk toward the window and climbed on top of it, shoving at the glass until it cracked with a dull pop. Shards fell outward onto the pavement below. Fresh air rushed in, thin but real. I kicked the frame wider and felt the metal bite into my hands as I cleared a space large enough to squeeze through. The drop was not high, maybe 15 feet, but the ground looked distant through the smoke. I lowered myself as far as I could, hanging from the sill, then let go. The impact jolted up my legs and I rolled hard onto my shoulder. Pain flared bright, but I stood coughing, turning back toward the building. Flames licked through the hallway windows, crawling along the ceiling inside. From the corner of the lot, I saw the drifter still watching. The owner ran from the office shouting into a phone, but the drifter did not move. He stared at the blaze like it was a show put on for him alone. When sirens finally wailed in the distance, he slipped into his car and drove away slowly, not looking back, leaving the owner on his knees in the gravel. I sat on the curb wrapped in a blanket someone handed me, lungs burning, skin stinging where embers had landed. The second floor collapsed inward before dawn, sending a shower of sparks into the early light. I kept thinking about the silent alarm, the jammed exit, the way he had stood there waiting for the payout that would follow the ruin. I paid cash for a place to rest, and nearly paid far more than that.